just investing in the S&P 500, it does sound really good, quite honestly, right? Like if we just think like the S&P 500, I actually have this little book in front of me.
Excellent.
That's
I was wondering why you were
I
wandering out
love
your
it.
office.
It's called the Matrix book. It's like all these really geeky numbers.
Oof. Okay.
But it basically, I can look at the return of the S&P 500 over any year or years. And if we go back to as far as we can, back to 1926, but I'm going to go to 1928 because that's where a lot of the other years are. 1928, the S&P 500 has returned 10% over like since inception. That's the average return, which is almost 100 years of data now, right? That's a really nice return. And the question is like, why would I invest in anything else? Well, to invest in other things, you have to remember that when we invest in things, we don't invest in things thinking that they're going to do exactly the same thing all the time. And what do I mean by that? I mean, there will be periods of time when investing in the United States will do better than investing in developed markets. So developed markets would be like China or Japan or France or the United Kingdom, places like that. Well, there was actually a period of time from 2000 to 2000 and the 2000 to 2009 timeframe that the S&P 500 actually didn't return anything.
Yeah.
But the rest of the market, the rest of the globe did. So in that decade, being invested around the globe was really helpful to you. When it's a period of time when the S&P 500 is winning and everything else isn't, it doesn't feel like it's helping you.
Right. And I think, what you're basically just talking about is diversification, right? You want a diversified portfolio. And I think one of my favorite quips about diversification is diversification means always having to say you're sorry.
Always.
Because there is always a component of your portfolio that's doing poorly because you own everything.
Yes.
And I think what strikes me is, I'm sure you also work with people who come in and they have basically all of their money in tech stocks.
Yes.
And that is a sort of clear example of concentration or a clear example of not being diversified. And people recognize that. Even if they don't want to change, they recognize that they're not diversified. But people think they're diversified sufficiently with the S&P 500.
Yep.
But some numbers and some cool looking charts that you were showing me earlier during our hour of chit-chatting before recording this 20-minute podcast.
Which is always the fun part.
Yeah. You were showing me this really fun map visually indicating the size of the global market that each country makes up.
I'll bring it up right now.
Okay. And what that map was showing, and it's a year or so out of date, so numbers have changed, but sort of not categorically, is that the U.S. market makes up, I think, 61, maybe now 65% of all the companies, publicly traded companies in the world. Okay, so if you're in the S&P 500, you're only buying U.S. stocks. So all of a sudden, you don't have 40% of the global stock market in your portfolio. And the S&P 500 is only 80% of the U.S. stock market.
Yeah.
So all told, if all you own is S&P 500, you are missing out on half of the stocks of publicly traded companies in this entire world. Right. Half of them, if you're only in the S&P 500.